I mean, I agree with his statement. Bitcoin, in my opinion, will go to $1 million. It's just a matter of when. And I think if we look at the macroeconomic landscape around the world of the excessive printing, along with other government policies, it's probably going to happen sooner than later. So I think he, in his statement, noted it would happen over the next couple years. I think it is possible it could happen over the next couple years. And as we see more and more adoption, not only from the traditional crypto market, but as it expands to other markets around the world, I think that's going to accelerate adoption. And one of the ways that we're seeing that today is through the on ramps of these Bitcoin treasury companies. So if we look historically at MicroStrategy, so MicroStrategy was really the pioneer behind developing a Bitcoin only treasury strategy. And in 2020, his team started accumulating Bitcoin, and they basically grew from a $600 million company to over a $100 billion company over the last 4.5 years with this particular strategy. Now we're having all these new entrants in all these jurisdictions around the world that are doing similar things where they're going public or merging with an existing public company with the goal to acquire Bitcoin for their balance sheet as part of a long-term treasury reserve strategy. Now, why this is so important in terms of the long-term adoption of Bitcoin is if we look at the global cryptocurrency market today, it's probably between $3.5 to $4 trillion, right? A big chunk of that is Bitcoin, the majority of it. So when we think about that market, that was kind of developed organically over time, largely driven by the retail investors in the early days. The institutions didn't actually start picking up the space until just recently. But there's a huge pool of capital that was never, ever entered into the cryptocurrency market on both the institutional side, more of the traditional asset management side, because they didn't want to go through the regulation or custody risks by doing it. But what can they do? They can buy public equity and they can buy public debt. And that's what's happening with these Bitcoin treasury companies, because as these markets, or excuse me, as these companies enter the market, it's going to allow this massive pool of capital that's never touched the space to start getting exposure to the space via an on-ramp that's regulated that they're familiar with.
And with the Bitcoin treasury companies that we've been seeing kind of grow pretty rapidly in this most recent year, are you concerned at all about the recent downturn we've seen in Bitcoin's price? Not every company is equipped to weather the storms, like a MicroStrategy, for instance, or strategy now that has a cost basis of like 73K a coin. But now that we saw a lot of people seemingly entering at the top, we've seen a bit of a drawback. How do you think this is going to play out in the near future?
Yeah, so my opinion on this is that not all Bitcoin treasury companies are going to make it. Not every company in a particular market is going to make it. There's going to be competition. I think that in the short term, so maybe that's the next 6 to 12 months, we could see a lot of performance opportunities out of these types of businesses. And then if there's a more significant drawdown, like we've always seen in the Bitcoin and digital asset space, then we can see a lot of these companies, maybe they have to start selling their Bitcoin to buy their shares back in the open market to balance their MNAV. Now, what the MNAV is basically the premium the company is trading at over its Bitcoin balance. And that could create an accelerated drawdown of Bitcoin's price. And then some of these companies may not make it in a situation like that. And we may see some acquisitions or some consolidations or just some flat out bankruptcies because they don't make it. But I think long term, if we stretch out past that, so I think they have the potential to do well in the short term. In the medium term, maybe they draw back and we could see some of the issues that I just noted. But long term, it's my belief that the largest Bitcoin treasury company in each jurisdiction around the world becomes the future of a Bitcoin denominated central bank. And Strategy sits at the top of that stack as the largest Bitcoin treasury company in the world. And then I think it trickles down as like derivative branches to all these other ones in different jurisdictions.
Yeah, no, I think I would agree with you on that. I think it's also really going to depend on like who are the stewards of these different Bitcoin treasury companies and who have these strategies that are looking toward the future in spite of some of these more recent pullbacks that we're seeing and likely will see if the history of Bitcoin is any indication. Another thing I wanted to chat about was the Trumps. They're taking their Bitcoin show on the road now through Asia. They're going Hong Kong, Japan, South Korea, Singapore. In your opinion, does this global push help Bitcoin's credibility in Asia, or does it risk making Bitcoin kind of look like a family franchise instead of a neutral global asset?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that Bitcoin has grown significantly on its own before this ever started occurring. And Bitcoin doesn't need an evangelist to go and, broadcast it from that perspective. It's already organically grown tremendously to trillions of dollars in value all on its own. So anything on top of that, I think, in my opinion, is largely just going to enhance credibility and adoption. And when you think about the Trump family, if you think about Trump's last term when he was in office, he was actually negative to neutral on Bitcoin at the time. Then, during the Biden administration, unfortunately, a lot of the regulators were weaponized towards the cryptocurrency industry. And when that happened, not only the cryptocurrency industry, but also specific other use cases, and one of them was the Trump family. So Eric Trump has spoken publicly about this many times, is they got a phone call one night and about 300 of their bank accounts, everything from Citigroup to JP Morgan to all these different ones, were basically just turned off overnight. And they had to scramble to get these new bank accounts set up so they could facilitate and continue business operations. So, if the regulators or the banking system has the ability to do it to a family such as the Trumps, it could really happen to anybody. And I think what they woke up to during that time is if we can get cut off, this could happen to anybody around the world, but what's the solution for something like this? And that's when they started to become much more open to Bitcoin in the digital asset landscape, in that you can transfer value online around the internet without the need for a bank or a third party. And that's incredibly powerful to be able to basically remove that power from the prudential banking regulators and the banking system and put that in the hands of the individuals that can move that value. And that was, I think, their big light bulb moment. And so from that point, they've just continued to aggressively educate themselves, build products in the space, and get exposure to different assets in the space. And I think the more they get into it, the more they learn how powerful it is. And not only how powerful the technology is in terms of solving these important use cases, but how powerful the community is in the Bitcoin and digital asset space. Because this is a community of people that basically figured something out before the institutions or before Wall Street or some of these bigger organizations. And they built this on their own over time across all different areas of the landscape. And that momentum is not going to stop. It's just getting bigger and bigger like a snowball running down the hill. And so when you have that much power in a community, you can really make amazing things happen.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So maybe it's like we're kind of looking at the wrong way. Some people are looking at it, oh, this is like the kind of Trump sideshow, and really they're serving more of as an example of like how you can escape from the shackles of traditional banking, and there are other opportunities out there in the Bitcoin space. Seemingly is very much one of those. So well put. Hang tight there, Brian. We're going to go right back to you in a sec. We're going to talk about this next story, and I'm definitely going to want to bring you in to chat about this one because Kindly MD is going full Michael Saylor. The company filed a $5 billion automatic shelf registration with the SEC, giving them the ability to issue basically any type of security Wall Street can dream up. Common stock, preferred stock, debt, warrants, rights, or Frankenstein units, you know. And the point of this financial buffet, well, use the proceeds to buy more Bitcoin. Yes, the company formally adapted a Treasury reserve policy, naming Bitcoin as its primary reserve asset. Corporate mission statement, HODL until further notice. Now, the filing does mention general corporate purposes like paying debt, acquisitions, and working capital, but make no mistake, the first bullet point is expand the Bitcoin treasury. Now, Kindly MD isn't new to this game. Earlier this year, they raised more than $500 million in private placements specifically for Bitcoin. They issued a $200 million convertible debenture secured by Bitcoin valued at no less than $400 million. And then last week, they casually added around 5,700 Bitcoin in one go. That brought their total to around 5,765 BTC. Now, with this $5 billion shelf, they've basically set up an unlimited line of credit to keep buying dips and even leverage existing holdings to finance further acquisitions. All right, we're bringing Brian back. Brian, Kindly MD just filed a $5 billion shelf registration with the SEC, basically giving themselves a whole buffet of securities to keep buying Bitcoin with. What does this tell you about where corporate treasuries are headed right now after seeing them do this?
Yeah, so full disclosure, Off the Chain was an investor in the Kindly MD Nakamoto transaction. I've known that team for many, many years, over a decade. I'm really happy about what they're doing and what they're growing.